Welcome to the Badger 247 show. I'm Matt Perkins, joined once again by John McNamara and Nick Osen from Badger247.com. Great to see both of you guys as always. I've been seeing your faces pop up in a lot of places these days, whether it's on other podcasts or just seeing your mugs on the internet as you tweet out more and more articles that are coming out on the site. So if you're not already, please make sure that you are subscribed to Badger247.com to keep up with all the latest news on the message boards and get some of the goodies from John and Nick and Evan and the rest of the team over there at Badger247. Since we last talked, two big commitments for Wisconsin. I've been talking about the secondary in my, let's say, issues with the secondary recruiting so far in this cycle. And they landed Zachary Taylor here, Nick, out of Texas. And this is someone that we weren't sure if Wisconsin was going to be able to pull him out of the Lone Star State. But in the end, it sounds like he and his family were really comfortable with what was going on in Madison and the culture of the team that really sort of pushed it over the top.
Yeah, Perko, this was a guy that would have been, I think, in our second show, so 2 shows ago, we're leading into his OV weekend. We felt like he's a guy, okay, the Badgers could go from maybe we'll see kind of what happens to a legitimate contender with him, right? Because it was his first trip up here, first time for his family. And I remember then speaking with him just shortly after the commitment, and he was very straight up, guys. He said, really, yeah, Wisconsin wasn't my top choice. But then we got up there and we saw what the program was like. They liked Madison a lot. They loved the guys. I want to give a lot of credit, guys, to some of the current players in that safety room, the DBs. I think they really helped win him over. And then, of course, Jack Cooper, Pat Lambert, Luke Fickle, I think they all did a really nice job. And I think he's one of those high ceiling guys, John. I mean, obviously, to get an initial 89 rating on 247 is not easy. He got that about a month or two ago, and it's going to be really intriguing to see, as I know we keep talking about the DB room going forward.
Yeah, I think that echo to what Nick said. You look at what he does on the film, that speed, I think, pops right away, right? He ran a 4.39 laser time in an Under Armour event. And then, a 10.5 clip in the 100-meter dash. It reminds me of last cycle with Grant Dean. He blazes that 100-meter dash time. His recruitment starts to really take off. Luke Emmerich was really the same way to a larger extent. Him coming off that injury goes out and runs a really fast 100-meter dash time. His recruitment changes. And I think that's kind of the same with Zach Taylor. I don't think that he had that one time that blew everyone away, but he reminds me of some of those safeties Wisconsin took in 25. I like the position versatility there. Wisconsin's going to start him at safety, but they could play a few different spots. Credit the coaching staff and a lot what Nick talked about. Not a new name on Wisconsin's radar, but the offer was relatively new. You get up on campus once and you get them out of the state of Texas. Houston was there, TCU, handful of other schools. I think Texas Tech, he took an OV too. So nice job by the coaching staff of identifying, getting him up there and wrapping things up before he was able to take all his visits.
Yeah, I think that he's a kid that, like you said, John, is really blowing up late in this recruitment process, very much like some of the safeties that were pulled in the last class. And you talk about speed. I think that the receiver that Wisconsin added, Zion Legree out of Florida, Nick, he's going to bring a lot of speed to the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, Perko, perfect segue, man. That's why you're the great host here, the point guard. Honestly, speed is the first thing that you see with Legree. But I watched his film a little bit further, kind of getting some scouting notes and things like we try to do. He's a little bit more twitchy than I kind of knew. Solid route runner. I think he can build on that tree, but I think it's solid right now. And really just a playmaker, guys, with the ball in his hands. I mean, you can never have really enough or too many of those guys. And so for that reason, as well as just kind of the way that Jordan Reed was able to recruit him really well, you talk about kind of a newer guy, John, with Zach Taylor. Like this all happened really in the last no more than 3.5 months tops as well in terms of some of that momentum. So I think that obviously adds to a guy like Tayshawn Bardo, who I know we both really like, John. And then as we get into further later in the show, like now you're kind of swinging for the big man, top of the board target, Jaden Petit.
Yeah, this has been a fun one to follow, and the domino effects that it's had at that wide receiver position. You pop on that tape, and the way he creates space effortlessly. I mean, down in Florida, I think that's what's kind of separates him, makes him special. You look at that offer sheet. I mean, a lot of big time schools on him. Former Ole Miss commit. Opens things back up, and Wisconsin's right there. Credit to Jordan Reed and that pre-existing relationship that he had there. I think that dates back to his time at Central Michigan, Western Michigan. I'm confusing my directional Michigans right now. I apologize. Yeah, so really good gift for Wisconsin, and it's kind of set them up now in a position to be kind of Jaden Pettit or bust. I don't know if you ever want to say anything in definitive terms in recruiting, but it's a nice class right now, and obviously with Jaden Pettit still out there, with him being in Madison recently, that would be a really nice final boundary piece to add to a class that's, Bardo, you talked about. I think he could do a lot of different things. Legree, to me, is more than just a slot receiver, even though I think that's where he'll likely start. So if they're able to finish with Jaden Pettit, I think that'd be huge for this coaching staff.
That would be one heck of a receiver class for them, especially as they're going to need some different body types, I think, especially here in they're going to need a couple of different body types, especially here as the offense changes into Jeff Grimes' system. That system, though, I think is definitely bringing some excitement to not just, the current team, but some of these future guys that they're recruiting, being a little bit more hard-nosed, being a little bit more downhill. But before we get to the real future, there were a couple other official visits that took place this past weekend, starting with a pair of teammates, Tony Forney and his teammate Combay from down in Georgia, John. And these guys came up and are clearly a priority for the staff at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. You feel a little bit better about safety and the way that you're moving forward with that position now that you got Taylor in the mix. We talked about this before. Forney and Combay, again, package deals, they're fun to talk about, right? I don't necessarily know that always happens or rarely ever happens, but if it were to happen, Wisconsin's a place where it could go down. Missouri's the other school. I think that those two would be able to play together. Again, we'll have to see how these next couple of days go. I do think Wisconsin's in a really good spot here, and I think Nick could probably talk about that a little bit more in depth. But really, I don't think either of these guys have really tipped their hand. I think you could make a case for any of the schools that are in their top five. I have a hard time seeing Combay leave that SEC territory. I think there's some schools down there that I feel he feels pretty good about. But Wisconsin, I think, certainly presented itself well. The second time for both of them to come up together. Obviously, Wisconsin, they are as high on Wisconsin's board as any of the schools recruiting them, right? I mean, Georgia's kind of lurking for both. If Georgia wants to turn up the heat today or any time before signing day, I think that changes things for both of them. It'll just be interesting to see how these next couple weeks play out here, because I think both of them have decisions that they want to get done in July.
Yeah, guys, this is really interesting here, John. So I spoke with Combay. I believe Evan spoke with Forney. I just feel like Combay is, a little bit higher on the board in terms of targets right now. I think it went really well. I mean, I think showing the family some of the depths there and just the exact role and just checking in on this recruitment a little bit. Like, I think the Badgers did a great job. I've always just felt like it was going to be a little bit tougher to get him up here, finally, like you mentioned, John, just over some of those closer schools. Haven't heard a ton about Georgia recently. I think the Vols are pretty close in there. South Carolina for him as well. I know he OV'd there. So that will be intriguing. And, we kind of progress with positional discussion like we did at wideout. To me, this is really going to kind of come down to, a name to really watch here soon, Perko, I think, is Chase Geeter, because he's another key target that OV'd. I think the Badgers have done a great job. And I don't get the sense he and his family are people that want to really kind of take this forever and into July. Like, I think something is coming soon, just in terms of checking around with some national colleagues and things. I don't have a date. I'm not even like for certain who is the favorite, but just from some conversations, I've had with Chase and checking in, I think the Badgers are at least probably top two. And I think kind of the package deal, those two safeties is maybe a little bit more of certainly a moot point if Geeter enters the fold, because I don't see a way they're taking 4 for sure.
Yeah, I mean, good point, Nick, and not to jump on top of you here, Matt, but the Geeter piece to this is significant, right? I mean, if you get him in the next couple of days or so, and Nick and I have talked a little bit about him and the schools he may be focused on and his timeline, that one could happen. I think at any time, right? I don't want to say it's going to be Wisconsin and we just are waiting here. I think there's probably 2-3 schools he's really focused on here, but then that changes the board in a similar way that I think the receiver board got changed, right? Where if you get Geeter and you have Taylor, then maybe it's like a Combay or bust, similar to a Petit or bust at receiver. So, like we talked about for a long time, how much Wisconsin likes those Georgia guys. A piece moves in a different direction, and then the board really evolves. It's just kind of the way June works with these OVs and the schools involved, and how quickly the process kind of plays out this month.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, let's talk about the non-defensive back in Ben Duncum, the defensive lineman who came up for a visit. And Wisconsin's still trying to finish off this D-line class, I think, probably with one more piece, a la who can play sort of, I think, not necessarily nose, but a lot of the other spots there in the Whitlow/Tressel defensive front. John, where do you think stand with him coming out of the weekend?
I think Wisconsin did a nice job with him. I heard some pretty good early buzz on how that visit went. Obviously, his first time up there. But you look with him, in the comments that he made, I think he talked to Evan about it. He kind of said, hey, I like where my recruitment's at right now, but he kind of alluded to the fact that it could take another significant jump here. And I think he mentioned Texas, he mentioned Baylor, some of those schools a little bit closer to his home. So we'll have to see where he goes here. I know he's got Kentucky coming up, Oklahoma State's there. I think those are the 3 schools along with Wisconsin that are in there right now. But you're curious to see if his recruitment takes a jump to the next level, because that's something that he kind of talked about in his interview with us and the story that we put out there at Badger 24/7. So tough to say. I think Wisconsin's right there in the mix. But what happens then if things kind of move along in the direction that he hopes to have it move in? And I think the outlook could be very different, in his opinion, if things move in the direction that he thinks he can move in.
Yeah, I would just add there, I love really how John laid that out. I'm kind of getting the sense that, like, basically, I think they did a good job. I think they like Duncum, but I'm not, maybe how we felt at like corner at a time or safety. I'm not getting this kind of overwhelming feel from the staff that they're like, there's a sense of desperation right now for like that extra D-line spot/edge spot, because you look at, of course, I expect them to get somebody at some point, right? But you're still in it for Jackson Ford. You look at the guys. I mean, there was just a tweet that I kind of put on the boards today just about the D-line class and some of the edge guys from last year. Like, it's young, but there's a lot of talent in those rooms, some that we expect to see this year. So while that's kind of Duncum's decision to kind of go a little bit further with some of those, I don't think that is something that, is kind of shaking up and worrying Wisconsin side right now either. I think they're going to be methodical about this. Of course, if Jackson Ford called today and wanted to be a Badger, of course he's in. I mean, he's a top 20, 22 guy at his position in the nation. So that'll be intriguing. But yeah, I agree, John. And it just felt like, I spoke with him as well. I just kind of did some nuggets under Evan's story. It felt like, I really like the Badgers, but I don't necessarily have a clear-cut timeline for when I want to decide, speaking of Duncum.
Yeah, I think Wisconsin takes him if he's ready. But like Nick talked about, you look at that 25 class, Sam Leteju, Jalen Williams, then you go to even a guy like Ernest Willer, guys that I think could play that jumbo edge, however you want to call it. So, I mean, the outlook there, I think, is pretty bright where Clayton, you don't have to. Yeah, right. Clayton has that true, probably edge rusher guy. Just, hey, go get to the quarterback. So I think the future of that position's bright, where you don't have to force something here. Like, if they don't get Duncum, I don't think they scramble and say, hey, who's the next up? We got to put another couple offers out there. Right. Ford, without a doubt, every day of the week you take them, even if you do get Duncum, I feel like. But,
Yeah.
I think they've recruited that spot pretty well. And I think the future's bright there. We don't have to force something here in this 26 class.
Well, it's not just the 26 class that the staff is concerned with right now, because they've had a couple advanced camps for 27s and 28s recently, and a lot of interesting names popping up out of there. You guys have seen what was going on in the field there as well. I know our friend Jake Kokoreski was out there. I saw you guys hanging out together. That looked like a lot of fun. But I want to know from you guys each, I guess I'll ask John first here, who impressed you the most out of the underclassmen that you saw recently on campus?
Yeah, Nick could probably go more in depth. I can speak to the most recent camp. I think that the biggest focus, right, was when we went to that camp, it was Ethan McIntosh. And we talked to a handful of people there, and that was the first name that popped up. And I think that's where we spent most of our time on. But really, that kind of evolved into watching the offensive line and then watching the defensive line. And I think Nick, like I said, Nick can go a little bit more in depth about the entire 4 camps, but a name that I really liked from that 27 class, Nehemiah Ombate or Ombati. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. The more that you saw him throughout that afternoon, the more reps he took against McIntosh, the more you liked him. I mean, he is a big kid, 6'4", 6'5", 270. Leaves with those D-line MVP honors from E.J. Whitlow in that group. I think he's a guy that Wisconsin's going to turn the heat up quite a bit. I don't want to say he's a no-doubt offer kid, but just the way that he looked on Tuesday makes me feel like they're going to keep pretty close tabs on him moving forward here. And I'll give you another name that I really like too. He's a 2028 kid, in-state kid. I know everyone likes everyone likes the in-state kids, but DeAndre Elin. He's going to play at Brookfield East, or he has been playing at Brookfield East. Big, stout, strong, potential nose. I don't know if there's room to put a ton more weight on him. He's probably 280, 285 right now, but he's certainly someone that I kind of made a big star by of keep an eye on this kid. Make sure you get out to see him this fall for his sophomore season and beyond. That wouldn't be surprising to see if he develops into a Power 4 kid. Obviously, a long way to go, but he was playing up with a lot of upperclassmen. He certainly held his own on Tuesday.
Yeah, John and our guy Payne and Coco, like you mentioned, our friend, they were locked in a little bit more on the lineman that day. So I really like what you said about Ombati. I'll just add a little bit about McIntosh. I do get the sense like this is somebody, obviously, the Badger ties with Chris McIntosh and such. But, I think that if he can obviously put on that weight, he's certainly got the frame, the size. I think there's some excitement around him. And I don't really ever do this, but I put in an early crystal ball. I got to watch him play, saw his excitement after the offer, and then we did I think the first story on him too after getting the offer. And I mean, he just seemed really, really pumped about it, I think for obvious reasons. So certainly a name to watch. And just Perko, looking at a couple camps prior, I'm going to give you a quarterback that has an offer. Caden Jones from California. I believe that was the Sunday prior. Yeah, the Father's Day. He was slinging it. He looks really good. J.J. Chapman, we've talked about on this show before. I know John and I have talked a ton about 28 kid. No question, a D1 guy. I believe a power conference guy, and it'll be intriguing. I know John or I will be at one of his games this fall. I want to mention Keyshawn Taylor picked up an offer at 27 edge from Rockford, my original hometown, which is always awesome to see. Same high school as Messiah Tilson at Guilford. So he picked up an offer. We just ran a story on him this week. Really impressive kid, good player. I think that's a name. And then let's have a little fun and look way in the future. Who knows what position he'll end up because he's already about 6'3", 215. But an 8th grader going into his freshman year, class of 29, quarterback Winnie Garnett. Already has a couple offers. So, Perko, this is pretty cool. His father, Winfield, I got to talk with him for a while. Awesome guy. He played next to Coach Fickle on the D-line at Ohio State. So that was kind of the tie there. I thought that, honestly, he looked incredible for that age. He probably looked more like a sophomore or so. So a few names to chew on right now, Perko.
A lot of good ones. A lot of ones getting people excited. The Macintosh one is really interesting to see. Just, our last athletic director had grandkids on the team. Our current athletic director may have some children on the team. So you never know how it's going to quite shake out there. But one of my favorite things about doing these shows, we get questions from the board. I think Honcho is really vying for that associate producer title. So he had a couple for us. We got some from others as well. So I'm going to throw a couple questions at you guys here to finish off the show. First one from Honcho. I'll start with you, Nick. At this point, are the last few spots on the 2026 class about filling specific needs or just taking the best available talent? And how does that impact how hard the staff pushes post-visit?
Great question from Honcho. Often they are. I'm a big fan of him. I think no question as we sit here in mid to late June, it's about some specific spots. Now, obviously, if they're not picking up some of those guys as we get to, August, September, senior evals, then maybe you need to take some of the best players you can see. But I talked about edge. I think eventually that's a spot for sure. Second corner, without question. Safety, I think they'd really like to do that. Receiver is interesting. I think it is, like John said, I kind of like how he said that right now. Pet it or bust right now. But that is an easy position that somebody's a little bit under the radar. Whoa, this 6'3" kid, he's a little bit newer to the game. He's putting up some good numbers. Keep an eye there. And then obviously, it feels like we haven't talked about it in a show or two, running back. Of course, that is that is a need right now. I think that obviously there's a good feel around the top target, Amari Latimer, but he has still been taking a couple visits, and he's certainly kind of posting like he's kind of interested in some of those schools too. So I feel good. I haven't moved off my crystal ball, but yeah, good question. I would say tailback, second corner, and maybe safety or edge, kind of some of the top ones for me right now, John.
Yeah, it's interesting as we move into, new roster constraints and how that might affect the high school recruiting. Obviously, we know how much the transfer portal has affected that. I don't know, Nick or Matt, if you guys agree, but how much can you really go of these luxury guys of, hey, let's find a spot for him. Hey, let's take this high upside kid, even though we feel pretty good about, where we are in this class at that specific spot. There's 30 plus scholarship guys on this roster going into fall camp. But, Nick, this class doesn't get to 21, 22, right? It doesn't seem to be a huge class because I do think that obviously you have the portal angle of it, but if we got to get this roster down to 105 at some point, or if guys are going to be grandfathered in, who knows what that looks like. But I think Wisconsin's conscious of that in this class, because I think at first glance, and I certainly did it when I started looking at that 26 class, usually you say, hey, you take the senior class and you just add 4, right? And you work on some attrition there. You really can't do that because, like I said, there's 30 plus scholarship guys, but they're not going to sign 30 high school kids like USC is lined up to do. So it's I don't want to say that the spots are super tight right now, but I feel like they're working much more off need right now. And then there's a few guys of no doubt, Pettit, Samuel Ford, right? But there's not a whole lot beyond that. I think this class is 20, 21, 22, and they're going to wrap it after that.
Yeah, but just a real quick add, I wouldn't even be shocked, John, if it's 18. I honestly wouldn't. You got to save some spots, but like you mentioned, I think this year especially, it's that new number and kind of the questions about it.
Well, let's keep talking about the focus of the recruiting cycles. Wide receiver and tight end, I think, have been, this is another question coming from the board. It feels like wide receiver and tight end have been to position of focus for this cycle. What positions do you think will be focused for 2027? I think personally that defensive line and jumbo edge is going to just be a focus of every class moving forward and has to be no matter what, just because you need so many of those players in this era. But I'll pass it off to John for more specific roster implications.
Yeah, right. I mean, you go into this class and obviously was running back. I put a big star next to receiver, and I think they've, I don't know. I'll be honest with you. Nick and I were talking a little bit, and I was pushing for a fourth receiver in this class. I was running it by Nick, trying to see what his reaction was. I feel like they maybe needed to, but look, you're under a little bit more constraint right now, and receiver's not as big of a focus as it was under a previous coordinator, right? So they feel good about that number. You feel good if you hit Pettit there. Looking a cycle beyond, right? It might flip back to the offensive line where Wisconsin's targeted those in-state kids. You look right now and it could potentially be an all in-state class. I think it's far too early to say it, but it is fun to talk about it. That could be a position of need. Corner, you're a little top heavy there. You feel like with 3 seniors there, you expect to see some major time. I think you're looking at 2-3 corners, right? I think those would be the slots I would looking at. But like you said, Matt, you're always going to go D-line, likely edge, because you're a little bit older there too. I would say those spots come off the top of my head, but a lot of work to still be done in 26 before you could really take a focus on 27.
Yeah, Perko, I was hoping to catch that one first because I knew that Mac and I would agree. For me, it's easily offensive line. I mean, it was the previous, O-line coach, like technically, of course, with 2024. Blaz comes in the class of 2025 and just absolutely crushes it. Honestly, one of the best classes in the nation by ratings, as well as just how guys seem to be adjusting early. I think this was expected to be. I wrote it. My gut still tells me they get a third in some fashion at some point. But 27, I mean, A, for the numbers. B, these aren't just questionable guys like that John is referring to in state. I mean, you have a top, I think we've got him as like a top 15 tackle or so, Cole Ryder. You got McIntosh, who, as John and I were talking at camp, like got to put on weight, room to grow, but his ceiling is pretty damn good. The Mallingers, Hunter just picked up an offer. They're both pretty athletic, kind of mean, nasty, can play versatile, but probably inside going forward. Kyler Kuhn, not in state, but I've got a story with him from Missouri, top 247 guy that he seems to love the Badgers. DeJon Yarbrough from neighboring Minnesota. So I expect the Badgers to take at least 4. Maybe another 5 man in 27. But other than that, I mean, I'm not seeing any glaring needs. I think corner, though, you're looking to get more pieces for sure, just in terms of numbers.
And I think with getting 2 tight ends in this class, they can kind of throw all their chips in the middle at Corus Loken to keep him in stake. He's going to be a hard one to keep. I mean, he's one of the top. He's going to be one of the top recruits of that position in the nation. But I think his is a recruitment that I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on as well. Back to the questions from the board. I got 2 more for you guys. We'll start with out of the recent camp performances, talking 27s, 28s. Who give me an under the radar kid for each of you who you think might earn maybe not necessarily a Badger offer, but a high D1 offer in the next 6 to 12 months.
Who's first here, Perk?
I'm giving it to you, Nick.
Okay. So, I mean, he picked up the offer, but just from what I saw from Keyshawn Taylor, I think that he's got the chance to be a high 3-star, low 4-star type of guy. And then somebody that doesn't have the offers quite yet, but I've watched him for a year and a half now. He's got a lot of interest. I think he's close on some offers. Would be quarterback Caden Gutzmer from Minnetonka. I'm not sure if, that comes from Wisconsin because they're in on several quarterbacks at this time. But I thought he looked good. I think he takes this stuff really seriously. I think he's got a pretty good build, tight spiral, playing on one of the top teams in Minnesota. So a name to watch for sure.
Yeah, I might look to Justin Johnson, 27 kid from Illinois, good size, 6'2", 180 pounds. Right now, got the Northwestern offer. Someone Pat Lambert was spending a lot of time with at camp, making sure he's checking in, make sure he was good. It's always a good indication of who Wisconsin's looking at. So he might be the guy I'm looking at. But I'd make another push for my guy, the 28 from Brook East. I like him a lot. I can't wait to see him this fall.
That'll be fun. And we will wrap it up here with our last question. Was there a recruit in this cycle who clearly clicked with the staff or players in a way that surprised you? I'll go back to Nick.
Now I gotta beat Nick
Okay.
I make sure he doesn't take my guy.
Go for it, John.
You go, Mike.
I'll go DJ Ba.
Okay.
Just, he was a very new name on Wisconsin's radar, right? They offer, get him up, close him out. And you look at the schools that are involved, like he was going to play in the Big Ten, but for Wisconsin to, from start to finish with him and be able to close him out, I thought that was really impressive. And I think it speaks to the connection that they made with him to pluck him from Tennessee. Overall, that was pretty impressive to me. I think it speaks to the question of, who really connected, because you get Bob there right away and he shuts it down. He had 3-4 more visits that he was going to potentially take. So I'm glad I hopped ahead of Nick of that one, because that's the one I had pegged when I saw the story getting ready to go here.
Yeah, that's a good one. Wasn't what I was going to take. I would probably go with Zachary Taylor. It just felt like, of course he's excited about his role. Madison sells a lot, but again, speaking with him, his family a little bit, just checking in, like it felt like the people, the players, the staff, just that Badger culture, honestly, essentially like won out for him. And so I think that'd be a big one. I like Ba. Another one that kind of comes to mind would be Severs, but also just because that's so far from home. But I think we did go into that first OV weekend feeling like Badgers were in a good spot.
I'll take Zion Legree on this one, actually. After the decommitment from Ole Miss, I think that the way Wisconsin really hopped back in there and was able to get on that and secure that commitment, I think that was pretty impressive. But let us know what you guys think in the comments here, on the message boards at badger247.com. We'll be back again next week on the Badger 247.
Can I add something real quick?
Yeah,
sorry,
go for it.
Hate to interrupt, but worth it for you guys. We've got just over a week left of this 50% off annual promo. I would not sell this stuff if I didn't believe in it. We're setting records with subscriptions right now, close to content records, guys, for the site. We appreciate it, and no signs of slowing down.
Yeah, 160 plus content items, and that doesn't even cover the stuff that we're talking about in the message board. Truly special stuff. I've been doing this for a long time. If you hit 160 in a month, you're having a phenomenal month. And, this team here has done it in 19 days. So I'm really, really proud of it. I'm excited to be part of this group. And I think, it's only going to get better from here. So like Nick said, let us earn your business. Give us a shot. Let us take you into the football season. Catch up on everything in June with recruiting. Still got a lot of stuff to go. Commitments, Wisconsin Advanced Camp. A lot of stuff to still go here. It's a great community, and we would love to, like I said, we'd love to earn your business.
If you haven't read it before, John's advanced camp reports are like must reads. Every time they come out, I'm setting aside like 30 minutes to go through. They're so detailed. I love them every single year. I appreciate that out of you, John. Appreciate everything you're doing, Nick, and we appreciate everyone tuning in here to the Badger 247 show. Make sure you're subscribed everywhere. And until next time, check us out on the message boards. Visit badger247.com, and we'll be back.